Hi there, folks. Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and today I am doing my last live recording stream. Why don't I know what this is called after like 3 years? Like my last thing from Cape Coral, Florida, where I don't know if you can hear this. I'm going to hope not, but a man across the street has just fired up the most sickly sounding weed whacker in human history. I don't think this thing's all right. It's, just chugging along. Anyway, hopefully you can't hear that. I can hear it, and I want to go over there and like do a little bit of CPR on the weed whacker. So hopefully that's not going to be too annoying and distracting for me as I talk about today's subject, which is kind of like short and sweet, I guess. And I did, like, this is sort of at the periphery of a freelancer question, but here it goes. The original one that I have up here, or the original email says, "Hi, I hope all is well. I'm hoping you can help me and my friend. We're wondering what a person who helps companies decide which software to use is called. Software consultant or something else?" She says the former. I think it's something else. Please help. So this question, it looks like the date on here is about 4 years ago. This is back when I was more actively doing was I still doing it at that time? The DaedTech channel, where I was doing more like general, like technical questions, some of which were freelancer questions. I think this kind of dovetails a little bit into the niche series that I've been doing, looking at niche ideas. So there is maybe kind of an implicit question here, other than like, what is this person called? Which is this a viable line of work, so to speak, helping organizations decide what software to use? So I'll dive into both of these things today. In the first place, so what is a person who helps companies pick software called? There are a few different roles that could help with this. So first and foremost, I'm assuming, given the tenor of the question, that we're talking about somebody external to the company, because it's entirely common for people who work for the company to be the primary drivers of deciding what sorts of software to use. In fact, I would say that's the case the overwhelming majority of the time is that people that work for the organization are going to typically be making those decisions, especially at smaller organizations. So you'd need to be a certain kind of size or have a very specific need and set of questions if you were going to outsource a decision like, what software should we use? And this would also maybe like depend a little bit on what type of software we're talking about. But like, let me say this. So first and foremost, one of the roles that would be making this decision is simply employees at the organization. Given that we're talking about matters of budget, a lot of times it'll be somebody with budget, usually maybe a manager, but probably a director or higher in the organization would be the ultimate purse string holder and decision maker, even if people reporting to them might actually be more instrumental in the decision, and that person is just kind of signing off on it. So typically this is going to be a decision that's arrived at by a committee within the organization, or maybe folks are pitching to a decision maker who allocates budget or whatever. So the most common situation is that it is going to be the people potentially using or administering the software that decide what software to use. Now, there could be scenarios where a consultant would come in, and I wouldn't call this person a software consultant. I might just generally call them a consultant. And you might enlist a consultant to help you decide what software to use. So here's an example of where I could see this coming into play. This comes up a lot in entrepreneurial circles, especially with bootstrappers or small agency or service type businesses, which is actually, I see this in like communities that I'm in, the Build a Better Agency community. Like people are always like, hey, I have an agency and I've got like 10 people or something. And like, what do you all use for project management? Like, do you use Asana or Monday or ClickUp or whatever? So that's a good example of a decision that actually might get outsourced even at a smaller organization. And the idea would be you're asking, it's not that you're bringing somebody from the outside in and saying like, hey, whenever we want to decide on adopting some software, we want like somebody to tell us what to do. This is a more specific consideration, which is you're essentially saying, I'm going to adopt like project management software or organization software. This is going to be the backbone of how our business delivery works. So if you are going to outsource this decision or part delegate this decision to somebody in a consultative type of role, what you're really doing is you're seeking expertise in operations. You've got an organization and you're going out and saying, yeah, I want help deciding what software to use, but really I want help installing some kind of operational efficiency in my organization. So it goes beyond just the selection of the software. If you're talking about a software like an Asana or a ClickUp or whatever it may be, there's also considerations like, how do you structure this? What are, if you're an agency, like, is each project in the tool a client, or is each team a client, or, how do we build this? How do we set it up? Where do we go about finding training? How do we make certain kinds of decisions? Where do we get support? All of that is kind of baked into the decision of which one of these to use. So the reason I'm walking through all this is you might have a role, there might be a person that I would think of as a consultant, but it is probably a specific kind of consultant with expertise in the outcome or in the raison d'etre of the software itself. So in this case, if you were to hire like an operations or process consultant, that's the right kind of role to hire to help you make a decision about like what kind of commercial off-the-shelf software to set up, how to customize that software for your process, how to adjust your process to the software, and when and how you should adjust the software to your process or vice versa. So like all of those decisions, and you're really looking at somebody who is skilled and experienced in operations. So what I'm getting at is there are going to be other examples of this as well. Like if you are looking for help in how to structure your books, and I've talked about this before, I'll see if I can dig up a video, because the answer to this question is just QuickBooks. But my point is, if you're looking for help in getting organized in terms of financial efficiency, you might rely on somebody like a CPA or some kind of consultant to help you answer the question, what bookkeeping software should we use? Again, the answer is just QuickBooks. Just use QuickBooks. You can go watch that other video if you want to understand why, but the answer is QuickBooks. Nevertheless, if we're between Zoho Books and Xero and these other things and QuickBooks, you might enlist a CPA or somebody like that to help you answer the question, which piece of software should I use? So I'm going through all of that to illustrate that asking for a simple title for this is more nuanced than you might think, because in all likelihood, there may be different forms of consultant that are helping you make decisions within their field of expertise. And that's really how I would do it. Now, given the tenor of this question and the nature of my blog, DaedTech, that was all about software, I'm assuming that the question assumes that we're talking about companies deciding which pieces of software to use in a tech stack, like, should we use what kind of deployment tool and CI/CD and so on and so forth. I'm guessing that's what's being referred to here, but I don't know for sure. And the thing that I would say is you don't want or need a specialized role as an organization to be like, this is a person that comes in and helps me like evaluate software of whatever flavor there might be. What you want to do if you're going to bring in outside expertise is to bring in the sort of person that has expertise in what the software is about. So the name of that role and whether that's a good role to be in as a freelance consultant is it's probably going to vary a lot by what it is that you help people with. In a lot of cases, you may be generically called a consultant, but like I was saying with the bookkeeping example, that's something that you're perfectly reasonably going to ask of a CPA, and their title would just be accountant, not like accounting consultant. So it really will depend on the person. Now, if you're looking to do this for a living and you're thinking about, I want to help clients decide which type of software to use, two things here. The first one, let me get this out of the way first. I was actually just having a conversation with somebody about this last week. There is a role, or like a role in the economy, if you will, that might be overlooked here, that you might not know about if you're watching this or asking this question. And that role is analyst. So an analyst is, especially in like an enterprise context, they're going to be a firm that, or potentially an individual that knows a lot about space. So the person I was talking to about this particular matter is very well versed in like the AWS ecosystem. So if you have somebody that's a real expert in AWS, in that ecosystem, in the kinds of software that people use there, versed in how it works in the whole 9 yards, what can happen is clients or prospects or whoever will come to you and say, hey, you're super knowledgeable about AWS and that ecosystem. Here's the problem I'm facing. I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do this, that, and the other. Here are my goals, et cetera. Like, what software should we adopt? That is something that analyst firms are asked all the time. So the most famous examples of these are firms like a Gartner or Forrester. They make their entire, fairly lucrative living as firms by compiling a lot of information about vendors and about, case studies of problems being solved in client spaces by those vendors. And it's essentially like a marketplace that exists. So the technology participants in the marketplace really want the analysts to know about them and recommend them in appropriate situations. And likewise, the consumers of analyst firms, the people that come to them, essentially will go to them and commission like a study and say, okay, here's what I'm doing. Can you propose a few different vendors or, help me pick the right vendor or whatever? So people on both sides have motivations coming into this space, and it's kind of a complex thing to navigate. I'm not an analyst, but I imagine it's, there's some nuance to earning your living and having your bread buttered while also staying objective and credible and authoritative and not being biased in helping to make these decisions. So the closest thing I can think of to somebody who is a professional software recommender is going to be an analyst. And I think the analyst, and again, I'm not an expert in the analyst space, but I believe analysts are going to have sort of a larger corpus, and most of the time they're making their living doing studies, getting to know offerings, et cetera. So they're really truly focused on this. And that is to say, where I was talking about listen to a CPA if they're asking you what bookkeeping software to use, otherwise probably don't listen to them. The analyst firms are going to have the widest area of coverage. So you could go to an analyst firm and commission studies or ask for their opinions about maybe a wider variety of software than in most narrow situations. But I think these types of firms are going to generally be, like Gartner and Forrester and that type of firm is going to be extremely expensive. But even, consultants, hundreds of dollars an hour. So it can be potentially beyond the range of a lot of firms and what's in their budget, depending on circumstances. So if you're out there and you're a freelancer and you're looking to make a living helping people make decisions about what software to use, I guess I would need to understand why that's what you want to do. But if you want to do that, you're probably going to come up against the idea of to what extent do you really want that to be your specialty? Because if you want to do nothing but answer that question, if you want that to be your specialty, I think realistically you're looking at a career as an analyst. And that's going to have, if you're going to be an independent analyst, that's going to have its own, set of things that you do and pursue. But if you're looking to, perhaps do some implementation and some consulting, or if you're looking to do project-based consulting or whatever, probably just having a scope that's limited to coming in and helping make a decision about adopting a piece of software is a little bit too narrow, I would guess. Because you're just, how often is a company making a major strategic decision? And it's going to have to be a major strategic decision to pay the bills, meaning if they're trying to decide, whether to use Notepad++ or Sublime Text, that's a pretty minor and easily reversed decision. So nobody's going to pay you $10,000 or $50,000 to help them decide. In order for you to command a rate that justifies doing this for a living, it has to be a pretty major decision, the kind of decision that firms don't make all that often. So what I'm getting at there is you're probably going to want to expand a little bit out beyond just helping them make that decision. Now, if you want to expand beyond that, if you want a big part of that, perhaps you're asking this question because you have some expertise in helping companies decide between tech stacks or source control. Well, that's probably not really a conversation anymore, but like whatever. Let's say that you have experience, circle back to project management tools. You have experience helping companies select among those tools. If that's the case, you're probably also an operations expert. So you can probably zoom out and say, sure, I can help you make that decision. But the reason I can help you make that decision is because I'm used to setting up operations with the company. So think about the decision that you're helping them make in terms of software. And then I would say zoom out to like what that software does. And that really becomes more of your focus. Now, I don't mean that to say like you become a consultant and you like say, I have no niche. I'm just going to help people who need help with operations or whatever. More what I'm saying is a decision. Like really, if you're consulting or if you're in business, what you're really in the business of doing, if you're not just a commodified laborer, you're trying to help your clients achieve some kind of outcome or some kind of transformation, some kind of goal. Choosing software isn't a goal. I mean, it's people might express that as a goal. It's like a task to be crossed off the list, but like you're making a selection and adopting some software because you're trying to do something else. The software is a means to some end. So you as the consultant need to figure out what that end is and figure out what kind of transformation the software that's adopted is going to help the client undergo. And that's really what your niche is going to be, is helping your clients achieve that outcome. Oh, and by the way, part of helping them achieve that outcome will probably be making a decision about this particular kind of software, or maybe a few different kinds of software that fall into your field of expertise. But that is, I think probably about all there is to say on the subject. The original question was just, what is this called? So to circle back to that, probably not a software consultant. It's probably not a first-class role unless you're an analyst. If you're not an analyst, you're just a consultant who's getting asked about that, or maybe you're an employee at the company. So to summarize, if you want to make a living purely helping people make decisions about adoption, you're probably looking at becoming an analyst. If instead you're looking to make a living as a consultant, you need to focus on something more or less tactical than the decision about which software to adopt. You need to focus on the outcome the client is trying to achieve by adopting that software. And then that client will look to you for your expertise in software selection, but also in, maybe the adoption and training and other aspects in and around this piece of software. So hopefully that is somewhat helpful, even if the original person watching this is watching this 4 years later. I don't know. Hopefully this helps somebody, and I will catch you all next time.